Welcome to the Do Good X podcast, a sanctuary from the entrepreneurial grind. Hosts Kimberly Danielle and Stephen Lewis, advocates for impactful entrepreneurship, guide you on the path where purpose meets business. Join us to slow down, reconnect, and explore the challenges of under-resourced entrepreneurs, uncovering the unique journey of building businesses that make a difference. Now, your hosts.
Well, welcome to the Do Good X podcast. My name is Stephen Lewis, and I'm a catalyst for positive change for communities and businesses. And for more than 2 decades, I've been working with leaders of faith and entrepreneurs to live and to lead a life of meaning and purpose. And so I'm glad to be here with my co-host, Kimberly Daniel. And it's good to be here and to talk about our conversation with our guest today. So I'll let Kimberly introduce herself.
Welcome, everyone. It is good to have you here. I am Kimberly Danielle, and I am a community builder, a co-host with Stephen. I have the pleasure of being that. I am a communication strategist, and I come from generations of faith-driven entrepreneurs and leaders who believe that our purpose should drive us to contribute to the common good. And we have a wonderful guest here with us today who I recently met this year, and I am excited to dive into a conversation with her today. So we have Recha Reid, who is Associate Director of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Institute at Georgia State University. Recha is responsible for designing, overseeing, and marketing university-wide entrepreneurship events and activities while developing high-level, local, national, and global strategic partnerships. And before joining Georgia State, Recha was the Assistant Director of Student Innovation and Undergraduate Research at the Georgia Institute of Technology. There, she created high-impact experiences for undergraduate students and opportunities that led to greater student innovation, discovery, research, and entrepreneurship. And she also managed the Emmy award-winning Invention Prize, an interdisciplinary innovation competition open to undergraduate students and recent graduates of the Georgia Institute of Technology. Recha was recognized for her dedication to promoting inclusivity and diversity and entrepreneurship and named the Equity Champion for the 2023 Atlanta Startup Awards. And in 2020, she received an Emmy Award, y'all, for her work at the Georgia Tech Invention Prize in the category of special event categories coverage live. And when I recently read about Recha and her work, I became interested in hearing her story and her wisdom, given her work at the intersection of education, entrepreneurship, and innovation. So we are happy to have you here with us, Recha, and we look forward to our conversation today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so delighted to be here. And so I can't wait to continue our conversation about innovation and entrepreneurship and how that intersects with academia. So, yay.
Yes. So, just starting out, can you share with us your story and what initially created your interest in working in innovation and entrepreneurship, especially at the intersection of education specifically?
No problem. So I won't give you all the gory details of my past, but I will start at a little thing that I used to do, the Invention Prize at Georgia Tech that you mentioned in my bio. So when I started at Georgia Tech, I was given the opportunity to manage the Invention Prize. And so this is a highly competitive innovation competition that is live streamed around the globe and is also on Georgia's PBS station, GPB. And so I was then later asked to develop the ACC Invention Prize. And it's a similar type competition, but it's across PBS markets and featured the then 15 ACC schools. And so because of the work with Invention Prize, because of the work with ACC, I was promoted and given a blank slate in some respects to look at the landscape of entrepreneurship at Georgia Tech, and then being able to kind of do what I want to do in some respects. And so I was able to partner with so many great people at Georgia Tech to build out a robust programming for undergraduate students. And let me tell you, nothing brings me more joy than seeing a student coming back and being able to say, we were able to take in all that you've given us, and we have this, we're making the money that we only our parents could dream of, right? And you see generational change, you see maturity, you see just the impact on the wider ecosystem in Atlanta and around the world. And so for me, I'm like, okay, this is my sweet spot. If I can do this for life, I'm in my happy place. And so I genuinely love helping others. And I get to do that also at Georgia State. We have over 51,000 students, along with alums, faculty, and staff. And so I get to be in the center of that with my colleagues in building out a robust entrepreneurial ecosystem at Georgia State and bridging the gap with the wider Atlanta ecosystem. And so how I got started and why I'm still doing something that I genuinely love.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great. So, Kimberly mentioned in your bio that you were named the Equity Champion in the 2023 Atlanta Startup Award. And I'm curious about what is your vision for the future of entrepreneurship, specifically in terms of cultivating more inclusive, equitable landscape?
So for me, I think about what we do at Georgia State. So for us, it's looking at really what is of interest to those around us and building a programming around that. So for us, we're thinking a lot of persons are looking at, the new tech, right? That what does the future of tech look like? What does tech look like in 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now, right? And building to that dream. You also have a number of persons who are trying to do tech enabled, because everything that we do now pretty much involves tech in some ways, right? And so how do we build that with tech? And then the other thing that we have and we see at Georgia State are students and alums who are building brick and mortar spaces. And so they often get forgotten when we're trying to look at the wider entrepreneurial ecosystem and we want the next thing, right? We want the next unicorn, we want the next $1 billion company, right? And saying, okay, for us at Georgia State and for me, building an inclusive and equitable landscape is building programming and solutions around every single one of those areas. And so we're building programs, and we have programs at the moment that touches on every single one of those. And one of those programs that we have is Main Street at Georgia State. And so for that, it's an accelerator program that takes any kind of idea. So if you're building a popsicle stand, we want to hear about it. If you're building the next AI, we want to hear about it. And to me, that is inclusive and equitable, where you say, come with your ideas. We're going to help you do the best that you can with that. We're going to build resources around you for you to be successful. That is truly the backbone of the United States, right? Where small businesses hire the most people across the United States landscape. And so I think there's some neglect happening there where we're saying, build the next AI, build the next tech. These are what we're focusing on, and not actually emphasizing that small businesses, mom and pop stores, are the ones that also are have such a broad landscape across the United States. And so we're helping students and alums to build out their ideas well. And that to me is an inclusive and equitable landscape.
So this Main Street Accelerator deals with kind of the whole spectrum of folks, whether, it's an idea for a popsicle stand to AI to those who are doing brick and mortar. Tell me, how does an accelerator address the kind of different places that people are in as it relates to developing their business? And were you behind the idea of Main Street?
So I was not behind the idea of Main Street at all. It's been around for the last 4 years, I believe. So to answer your question, I'm going to answer your other question that you may have indirectly asked without saying it. But how do we address that area, right? Tackling, making it possible for us to address the popsicle and the brick and mortar and the AI, right? Focused businesses.
Yeah, because people are at different stages of their development, right?
100%.
I mean, people are at different stages of their development of their business. Yeah, so say more.
So one of the things that we do is we don't take it for granted that people have the knowledge. right? So oftentimes, sometimes it's blind luck that gets someone where they are, but their foundation is rocky, right? And so for us, the accelerator covers all of this, right? It covers ideation, it covers customer discovery, it covers, funding, it covers how to actually, do your books, right? So all these things that you need, regardless of whether you're doing brick or mortar or AI. But we also, for example, start after 6 o'clock, right? So that if you have a business, if you are in school, whatever stage you're at, that's usually a sweet spot of time where we actually say you likely can actually make the workshops and the programming that we have. We also do it over 6 months. So for a lot of accelerator programs, they're like, okay, you need to be full-time on this. That's the only way we're going to accept you. Well, that's not equitable or inclusive, right? And so we take that off the table 100%, right? Another thing we don't do is we actually provide early stage funding. And so for us, it's saying, here's 5,000 or 10,000, depending on the funding we have at the moment, for you to do what you want with it. So the dream is to put that into your business. But for somebody maybe paying for a babysitter so that they can come to the programming, right? So we want to make sure that you can utilize the funds in the best way possible for you to work on your idea. So in your question that you didn't actually ask, right? In terms of, no, I didn't start it. But one of the things that we always want to do is look at what we're doing and seeing, are we doing it the best way possible? Is the way that we can actually do this better. And so part of my job has been looking at the Main Street program and saying, okay, where the gaps are, where the holes are, what can we do to make sure that persons at any level can actually be successful, even more successful than they are. And so for the last over the last few months, I've been working with different partners across the ecosystem to actually leverage that. So we now have a partnership with a law firm. We now have a partnership with a financial firm to say, hey, likely for a number of persons, they don't have a lawyer in their family. They don't have a lawyer as a friend, right? They can't just pick up the phone and go, hey, I have a question, and not be charged $200 and more for that call that really doesn't warrant all of that cost. And so we're partnering with different organizations to say, hey, can you lower that barrier so that they can ask the questions that they want to ask? Of course, if you need something a little bit more robust and, a little bit more time consuming, then you likely have to come out of pocket. But again, you get funding for that. But the aim is to broaden that network for entrepreneurs so they actually have access to all these things that for some entrepreneurs it's easy to come to, right? And so again, that's some of the ways that we're building this environment, and we are not stopping there, right? So we are looking at, are there other things that we can do? For example, the last time that we ran the program, which was last year, we worked with a number of accelerators and incubators, other ones, and co-working spaces across Atlanta to bring our entrepreneurs there so that when they leave our program, you're for life in Main Street, right? You can't get rid of us, right? But we also want to provide them with other opportunities, right? So for us, we brought them to, for example, the Russell Center, right? So they can actually see, there's another space. We brought them to the Gathering Spot. We brought them to Atlanta Tech Village, right? So for us, it's not a competition, right? Where we're saying, we want to ignore all the other things that are out there, but we want to expand the environment of our entrepreneurs so they know that all these things exist in the ecosystem and they're not alone when they're trying to build this thing and they're trying to scale this thing. So hopefully that answered that.
Wow, that's great.
I love how you all are intentionally building partnerships with others in the ecosystem in Atlanta, because this is not something to tackle alone. And you answered a question that came up for me in your response to Stephen, which was going to be, what do these students do after they finish the 6 months? And it sounds like you all really set them up well with other places and spaces and organizations that they can connect with to resource them for what's next. And I'm curious, because your work also intersects with innovation, and you talk a little bit about that. How do you define innovation, and what have been maybe 1 to 2 of the most innovative ideas or businesses that you've experienced in your work in this educational context?
Oh, okay. So I usually think of innovation and invention within the same space. And so a number of times persons are like, you need to invent something. I'm like, hold on, stop the presses. Let's revisit the invention thing just a little bit, because we're in 2024. There's a rare person out there that can actually invent something that has never existed before, right? So we stress innovation, which is looking at the environment that you're in, looking at the world around you and say, how can you improve? What can be changed to make this more accessible, easier to navigate, all of those things, right? So for us, is very much stressing innovation. And that's one of the things we start with our startups, right? So again, they're likely not going to reinvent the wheel or make a thing that completely eclipses the wheel, right? But is it the best version of it, right? Can you improve on that idea? And so that's one of the things that we work on, is we say to them, behavioral change is super hard for anyone, right? It doesn't matter if you're the person who jumps out of a plane, or someone who can't figure out how to text a message, right? Behavioral change is hard. So what we're saying to our entrepreneurs when they come through our doors is, yes, you want to build the same brick and mortar that currently exists. How are you different? What would cause behavioral change for these persons, these customers, to come to your door instead of somebody else? If you're doing something in the space of AI, again, how is it different? Because everyone is on the AI bandwagon at the moment, right? And so how are you doing it? How are you actually solving the problems in a way that people want to actually take to change and pay you for that solution that you're providing, right? We stress all the time, and I stress this in all my coaching conversations, we're not here trying to build hobbies. Right? You don't just, if you need a hobby, spend your weekends, right? But if you want to make money on your idea, you generally have to find a problem to solve and not have a solution looking for a problem, right? And so that's how we think about innovation when we have that conversation with our entrepreneurs, or even our students who like the concept of entrepreneurship but have zero clue what's going on, right? They just want to be an entrepreneur. They don't even know what entrepreneurship means, right? And so that's some of the ways in which we're trying to kind of think outside the box, or enable our entrepreneurs or students or potential innovators to think outside the box and implement innovation in a way that makes sense for them. So Georgia State has a number of programs. So one of them is the Creative Media Institute, is CMII. It has two I's, and I usually forget one of the I's. But they do gaming technology. They do generative AI, and they figure out how to combine that with, say, script writing, right? So they're always thinking about different ways that you can utilize what currently exists, right? So when we think about AI, right, the languaging thing, for many of our students, they're not going to build the language processing system that these are built on, right? But we're teaching them how can you utilize them well, right? And kind of skip some of the steps to get you to that end result that you want. In our classes, we're actually, a lot of our professors are saying, okay, here's the reality. I'll give an example of ChatGPT. You can say, don't use ChatGPT, and you're going to have some of the students who are going to do it well, right? They know how to cover their tracks when they're utilizing ChatGPT, and another student doesn't, right? So instead of saying no AI, no all of that, when that's pretty much part of their lives anyway, for one of our professors, for example, they're saying, like, go ahead and use it, but you need to know what the knowledge is. You need to know if the AI is giving you incorrect information. But at the same time, what he does is that he does on-the-spot presentations. And so, yes, you may have used the AI to help you write your paper, but you're going to have to stand at the front of the class and expound upon what you wrote about. So if you just relied on the AI to figure out what to say and what the knowledge base is, you're going to have problems when you have to do that presentation. And so for us, we're saying, okay, it exists. You can't hide away from it. How can you utilize it well? Because again, they're going into the world of work. If you teach them how to use it well, then you can actually enhance their careers instead of making a deterrent for them when they get that job or when they start that business. So.
Wow, that's great. And so as I'm listening to you, one of the things that I'm interested in is, what is the success rate of the students that come through your programs, particularly Main Street, and what are some of the best ways to equip aspiring entrepreneurs on the journey to help them create sustainable businesses and not hobbies? And this is particularly important because, the majority of folks who come through accelerators oftentimes don't have the success that they're looking for. So tell us a little bit about what success you're seeing as people coming through your accelerator. And then what are the best ways to actually prepare aspiring entrepreneurs to be successful?
So we don't have a comparative rate of success for our, say, accelerator program versus other accelerator programs. We rate success in two different ways. And so a number of our entrepreneurs have gone on to be in other accelerators. And we normally ask them for comparative information, like how was your experience in Main Street versus another one, right? We get a resounding 100% in terms of they saw greater value in our accelerator than the other accelerator, right? Because of the high level of touch we have mentorship, we have a ridiculous amount of hours of coaching. These persons that we ask for to participate in the workshops, to lead these workshops, we walk into those conversations saying, hey, what happens to the follow-up with this? So all of our facilitators are willing and open to continue the conversations outside of the classroom. So the entrepreneurs in our program don't get a one-off touch and then that's it. If they have a customer discovery question a month from now, our facilitator is there to say, hey, talk to me. Do you want to have coffee? Do you want to have dinner? We want to actually break down what your lack of understanding is or where the gaps are in your knowledge, right? And so we emphasize very much a high touch in our accelerator, which is often missing in a number of them. So the truth of what we're doing is a little bit different. So a lot of accelerators have a base that you can start, right? So you have one or two customers and then you can join our accelerator. So what that means is that you're already in momentum and then they're enhancing that momentum. For a lot of our entrepreneurs, they're at idea stage, right? And so then that is a much heavier lift to get them to where they can actually start earning money, testing out their ideas, scaling, all of that. And so we recognize that that's not fair to our actual entrepreneurs because we're saying, hey, you need to push, you need to get past this barrier. But the reality is that for a lot of them, when you go to a regular accelerator down the street, they've been working on this idea for 3 years, right? And now they're in the program. And for us, they may be working on the idea for 3 months. So that runway is a little bit different. And so starting in fall, we actually have expanded programming. And so one of the ones that we're going to be starting is called Work. And so with that, we're saying, come through that program. Actually, that's not the best idea. We have one called Actualize. And so we get you from idea to a prototype stage. And so what does that mean? So that when you enter the Main Street program, you already have a working prototype that you're working on, that we've actually worked with you before. And it may take you 3 months, it may take you, a year to get you to that thing that's working and now ready for the additional information that you're getting in Main Street to actually step in and utilize all the information you're getting. And so that's some of the ways. So we expect in the future to see a higher turnaround or a shorter ramp for our accelerators to start making money. And so we're building up programming ahead so that when they get to Main Street, then their runway is a lot shorter in terms of being able to earn funding and grow and scale. And so hopefully that will see a higher success rate. But we do just overall, but it takes them at the end of it, the success rate, the ramp is longer after Main Street for us to see that turnaround. And so that's one of the reasons why we keep on doing ongoing coaching, mentorship, facilitation, all of that to ensure that continued success. For example, this summer, we have 6 workshops that are aimed at our Main Street alums. And so that's what I'm saying. We have persons coming back 4 years that have been in the program from year 1 to participate in this programming because we are still sending them like, oh, this is a competition that will align with what you're doing. Oh, there's this funding opportunity that is focused on food. You're in the food space. This would be good for you. So we're always looking at opportunities for our Main Street. We keep tabs in terms of what they're doing, where they're going, and what do they next need.
You all are really creating a runway, not just for Main Street, but specifically for undergraduate students. It's setting them up well for when they do graduate and move into entrepreneurship. And some folks don't get to that until after they graduate and get the clarity that they need to really launch a viable business. So I want to acknowledge that, because I don't see that in all spaces when it comes to entrepreneurship. So that's really great work that you all are doing. We are going to kind of shift just a little bit and dive into some resources, because I know that you have a wealth of resources with the partnerships and relationships that you have, and really knowing and learning and growing the ecosystem that you all are leveraging and connected with through your work. We want to explore the various resources and practical tools and tips that you can share with underrepresented entrepreneurs to support their entrepreneurial endeavors. So the first question I will ask you, Recha, is who are the top 3 people, or what are the programs or communities that aspiring entrepreneurs should know about in Atlanta?
So heads up, that's a very hard question. I daily try to add on to my network. So I'm like, who, what, based on what you're thinking about. So I actually thought about not people, in terms of, my LinkedIn is there. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. And if I've done this for many entrepreneur, if you say, oh, I'm in the health tech space, we can find somebody for you, right? Part of my job, whether I get paid for it or not, is to build out the ecosystem. And so we're going to connect you with who you need based on the level you're at to enhance what you're doing. So I would say ecosystem builders like myself. I'm not the only one. There is Atlanta, to me, if it's not recognized as yet, will be recognized in the future as one of the connector capital of the world. Many of the persons that I know within the ecosystem will drop everything they're doing to make sure that that connection is made. And I've heard people when they've come to Atlanta say, we've never seen that. So ecosystem builders like me, go onto my LinkedIn, and everybody within my, my LinkedIn network, feel free to connect with them, but also we can make warm connections for you. One of the things that I think of that is a good resource is Startup Atlanta. And on the Startup Atlanta, you can just Google Startup Atlanta, it will come up. There's an ecosystem guide. And that tells you all the accelerators, the incubator programs in and around Atlanta. It tells you where, if you need a makerspace, it does a really good job of just exploring all the things that tackles, that is in the space of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship and innovation within the ecosystem that you can take advantage of. We also try for the ENI newsletter, so feel free to go onto our website, eni.gsu.edu. We have a newsletter that we push out monthly, and part of that is telling you exactly what's happening in and around Atlanta for no cost, and also the different events and programming that's open to you as well. So when we're thinking about ideation workshop and scaling workshop and funding your startup, those are open to the environment, the ecosystem. And so if you're like, I don't know how to do that, or I want to get a refresher on that, feel free to join us. Most of our programs are virtual. And so, because again, life happens and people are doing other things. And so you can always jump onto one of those workshops and you will have access to that information as well. And so those are the 3 things I would think about. But really, Startup Atlanta Guide or newsletter at ENI, and then go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn sometimes is your best resource. And so feel free to connect with me. But there are so many of us that want to ensure that you have a successful runway and that you're successful in whatever you do. So we'll connect you to who you need to be connected to. FYI, I also have limited funding. So when you jump on for connection, don't try to sell me something.
Let me ask you this. If a student is interested in pursuing innovation and entrepreneurship at their academic institution while pursuing their degree, what schools should they consider?
So this is a loaded question for me. So the reason why it's loaded is because the recognition is there that we have a few universities within Georgia that's doing entrepreneurship really well, right? But we also, that comes with a cost. And so we also have the reality of, for some students, you want to go to the school that you hear of all the time as doing the best in entrepreneurship. However, your pocket doesn't align with that institution. And so one of the programs that we have is called Innov8GA. It's INNOV8GA. And so you can, again, Google that. And so what we do is that's a collection of universities coming together to actually build resources and connect with each other across Georgia. And so I know these people, they know me, right? And so at Georgia State, we have a major in entrepreneurship, we have a minor in entrepreneurship, we have certificate programs, we have general courses you can take, then we have workshops that's available to you and funding and all of those fun stuff, right? And so you may be sitting there going like, okay, I need to go to Georgia State. I appreciate it. I want you to come to Georgia State. However, if your budget doesn't align with Georgia State and you have other issues at home that doesn't allow you to leave, we still have resources for you, right? And so if you connect with the person at your university that's in that space at all, or somebody in the business school, they'll likely sit with us in Innovate Georgia, or you can just go to the website. You can reach out to any of us. We will make it work for you. We will figure out how to connect you with resources. So our mission at Innovate Georgia is to make sure that any student across Georgia, regardless of the institution that you are attending, still have access to quality resources. You're not alone, right? And so it doesn't matter if you look and you go, our university doesn't have an entrepreneurship center. That's fine. The other ones across Georgia are there also as a resource for you, right? And so, for example, UGA, they have funding to literally build programming out for the wider community, right? Georgia State at the moment doesn't have that specifically. But again, all of our workshops are open to all persons. So if you live, 30 minutes away, jump on a Zoom call with us, right? So there are resources available. So I want to make sure that someone is not necessarily, if they can't afford it, not say, I'm just going to take a whole bunch of loans to make sure that I get into that institution because I think that's the only way I can build a business.
Thank you for sharing those resources for people who are coming from different spaces, contexts, and making it accessible to everyone in different ways. So you all who are listening in and you're aspiring entrepreneurs, and the question that Stephen asked really is where you are at. Make sure that you are tuning into Recha's response and connecting with her and taking advantage of the resources that she just named, which we can also put in the show notes as well. One last question about resources here, Recha. And this is more really centered on you. What resource has been instructive for your work in entrepreneurship, innovation, and education?
So when I first started in this space, I think it's important for someone to do their homework, to do a good job. I'm talking to students and I'm in a position of power. I know it sounds weird to say it because I'm not necessarily a powerful person in my organization, right? But students take information in as the truth, right? So oftentimes you're not saying, okay, she may not know what she's talking about. They're going to be like, okay, you said it, so that means it's truth. And so I was at Georgia Tech at the time. And so I was able to fund my education in terms of IDEO. So it's capital IDEO space U. And they have a number of workshops and programming. They're one of the ones that pioneered, in some sense, the lean methodology tied to entrepreneurship and innovation. And so for me, I took a bunch of classes with them, right? I sat in on pitch competitions and when people were given pitch workshop and ideas and everything. And my brain kind of works that way anyway. I'm a logical thinker. So if you come to me and say, I want to do shoes that can only walk upstairs and not downstairs, I can probably work out with you how you can make money off it and how you can actually leverage it to make it a good idea that people actually want to pay for it. And so, so that's kind of some of the resources. And honestly, just being in Atlanta helps a lot because there are a number of persons that I've encountered. I've had lunch with them. I've coffee with them to just pick their brains in terms of if a student asks me about this, what is the logical answer? And so I've tried to build out kind of a robust way of being able to talk to my students in coaching sessions or anyone in Atlanta, because I've also coached a number of people in Atlanta as well, to actually say, what are you actually getting at? What problem are you trying to solve? And actually meet them where they're at so that we can walk away with a robust way of leveraging their knowledge, their skill set, to actually build out a business that makes sense and that they can actually make money off and not be living on their couches or couches of friends, because that's not acceptable. And so that to me has been those two things, being able to network and people being willing to talk, and also just good old-fashioned courses that I was able to take advantage of has been super helpful for me.
Thank you so much, Recha, for that. And I took courses through IDOU, and I believe Stephen has taken courses on IDOU as well. So it is a great resource that I would recommend. Stephen, would you agree with that as well?
Absolutely. Particularly around business strategy and business innovation. Yes.
So make sure that you all check that out and see what they have to offer, and also lean into the networking, especially if you're in such a rich space and community like Atlanta. Lean into that. Get out. Don't try to do this alone. Get out your space, network, talk to people, and be open to the insights that emerge. And if you are not already full of rich resources, we want to just add to that list. If you want more resources, we want to help you on your entrepreneurial journey. So you can go to dogoodx.org, and here you can join our Do Good X LinkedIn community, access tools and tips and other resources that we offer. So we hope you check it out. And in addition to all the resources that Recha has named. And now we will shift to this last segment here, off the cuff, where we are going to ask Recha a series of questions that she has not been provided. And we just want you, Recha, just to say what comes up top of mind for you as we go through these questions. So I'll just go ahead and ask the first one, which is, what has been the greatest gift you have received from your work?
Oh, wow. I think I mentioned this before. I love serving people, right? That's my happy space. And seeing my students come back, whether as an alum or even as an older student, and seeing the change in them, whether just the confidence, because entrepreneurship, when done right, builds confidence, right? And so being able to see them come back with their shoulders back, being able to make that generational change for their family is just amazing to me. That's my greatest gift, being able to see that my work, if I die tomorrow, I've made an impact. And that's kind of my end goal, right? If I live until tomorrow, if life gives me 20 more years, the impact I have on the world is something that drives me. So I love when I get to see it.
So then what is one or two things that you do to navigate roadblocks and build confidence?
In myself or my students?
Yourself. And your students.
I like that one. And your students. I usually, maybe it's having a blessed life, but I don't usually think people are putting up roadblocks just because they're bored and they have nothing else to do. I think there's usually a reason for the roadblock. It may be that they're not understanding where I'm coming from, or I'm missing something from their end that they're, having to wrestle with, deal with, that I'm not getting. And so if I'm experiencing a roadblock, I usually try to take a step back. I try not to take it personally, because none of this is personal, or if you take everything personal, well, that's just shaping up for sad life. So I usually go and say, okay, fine. What am I missing in the, I'm going from my end because the only thing that I can affect is myself. I can put, feelers out there and opportunities out there, but I can't make anyone else change or, do different things because they have to want to. So I go and say, what can I change within me, or how am I phrasing things or looking at things that can shift the roadblock a little bit? Or it may be a delay, right? Okay, I need to tackle something else to actually make this opportunity a reality. And so that has been successful so far in terms of when there are roadblocks and I go, okay, is it tied to funding? Is it tied to a goal that they're trying to achieve? Is it something else that's happening that I can navigate? But I usually walk into relationships going, how can I help you first? More than how can you help me? So if I'm not navigating a relationship, a partnership, then I'm going, okay, what is a benefit for you? And I'm leading with that first before I go with how can I get help for my students. And I try to teach that to my students, not necessarily the same way. For me, it's more of like, how do you get a customer? The easiest customer to have is a customer you already have, right? And so I speak to them about keeping your customers, right? So not spend the time going, oh my gosh, I need 1,000 people, I need 5,000 people, I need 10,000 people. If you have 100 people, how do you keep them? How do you retain them? How do you make them sticky? And then those persons are often the ones who are your best advocates in the world that can actually leverage that to get to 1,000, right? And how do you keep them, right? And so that's usually how I talk about roadblocks for my students, but how I navigate it for myself as well.
That's really good. What is the greatest piece of advice that you would offer to aspiring entrepreneurs?
So the first thing I would say to them is build an idea that people actually want to pay for. Don't be a solution looking for a problem, right? So like, oh, you built something, but you didn't talk to anyone, or you talked to 5 people and now you build out something robust that you think people will buy. No. Find a genuine problem that people are trying to solve and then work on that solution. I next say, know your customers, know your customers, know your customers. That's the most important part of anything you're doing. If you don't know your customers, then you don't know if your solution is going to match what they're actually experiencing. And you never stop knowing your customers, right? So I'm not married, but I would say like a marriage, right? In terms of know your partner, right? For life, they also change, right? And so I say, think of your customers like a marriage, if that's the case, right? Where for life, you're getting to know them. They're going to shift. They're going to change what you need to adapt in what you're doing so that you can still be the solution for their problem. I would also say take advantage of the resources that are there for you. Whatever you're looking at, there's likely going to be a free version of that. It may not be the best, but it gets you to where you need to be. So even with solutioning, I say to a student, if you want to build like an electric car that does all these fancy things, don't build the car from scratch and do all the things, right? What can you cobble together that you can still test, get feedback on to know whether or not that's the right direction you're moving in? So a lot of times my entrepreneurs the entrepreneurs I see are paralyzed in the moment. They're like, oh, I want this dream that they want, and they want to wait and build it and perfect it. And I'm like, that's not, no, pull it all the way back. What can you do within the next week? What can you do within the next month to get it into the hands of at least one customer, to get their feedback, to get their understanding, to then know if that's the right road you're going on? Whatever you can do manually, do it. So take advantage of, can I name softwares like programming here?
Yeah, sure.
I can. So for example, cobble together Airtable with Softer, and that gets you a landing page with different things that's happening in the background that the customer on the front end thinks is this fantastic AI developed thing that you've built. You haven't. You have just pretty much Empire, the Wizard of Oz it. Like you put a good face on it, and you're doing the manual work on the back end to test out your idea, right? And so I usually say to entrepreneurs that I'm dealing with, get it as quickly to a prototype as possible. Get into the hands of your customers, 1 or 2, 100, whatever it is. get their feedback, make the changes you need to make, and then you can start going, okay, can I get some funding in to then be able to build out something a little bit more robust? But don't sit in paralysis while you're trying to make it perfect, right? And I give them the example of like iPhone. Like if iPhone 3, you like when you compare the 2024 iPhone to the one that came out first, you'd be like, why was this even on the market? But guess what? They didn't sit there and wait for the 2024 version of it. And the one that they're giving you now and you're paying for is still not the final version because they've held back something so that they can sell you the same thing next year, right? So it's never in a perfect, don't touch it, is now solid mode, right? Get it out there, get it in the hands and, get the feedback and make the change accordingly. Now I'm going to get off my soapbox.
That's great. So let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you attribute your success to your own faith versus your own grit or hustle?
I would put faith first. So don't practice this. This is just me. This is my relationship with God. I don't ask for things, right? If I'm praying about something, I'm praying about other people, but I'm rarely praying about myself. So my sweet spot with God is I need to work in a space. So we have conversations, right? So the conversation is, I know I need to work in a space that helps people, right? That could be, and I don't like blood. So everything else is I'm going to wake up every morning and I'm going to treat the day as if I'm working unto God. So I've done that for my entire life. So I wake up in the morning, I go to work, and the level of work I put in and what I put in has nothing to do with my paycheck. It has nothing to do with who my supervisor is. It has nothing to do with my colleagues. It has to do with me. I have a standard that I internally need to keep because that's what God and I talked about. I need to reflect him well in what I do. And so that enables me to show up in a way that is helpful to others because when I have to help people. And two, I'm going to treat them as if they're royalty and they're getting the best of me every single day. And so that has led to a lot of promotion and different things because oftentimes I find out later that I think I heard from someone, I don't know who said it. I really should figure it out who, that your name is being spoken of in rooms that you have not yet entered. And that always resonated with me so much because I've seen that over and over again where somebody's like, oh yeah, we were, you see this thing happening now. That's just awesome. But they're telling you that, oh, we were talking about you for like 6 months now. What? Right. But that's because I'm not thinking, oh, I'm doing this because this person is watching me. Right. I'm working from home today, for example. My boss, trust me, he knows that I'm going to go 100% every single day. So when I can't distinguish that from grit or resilience or faith, because to me, it's all the same thing. I'm going to show up as me 100% every day because that to me is representation of God.
Here is our last prompt. Complete this sentence. Because of my entrepreneurial endeavors, communities will be or are more able to blank.
Are able to connect with each other and feel seen. That is not proper English, but I think you get the point. So I think it's important for me when I talk to an entrepreneur, I want them to know that I'm hearing them. That I'm not trying to draw a cookie cutter. My English today is just fantastic. A cookie cutter line around what they're doing and their story. I want to hear their story. So oftentimes when I'm talking to an entrepreneur, I'll say, why are you doing this? Right? It doesn't matter if you're building an AR or mom and pop shop. I want to know why, because that usually drives how you interact with customers. And that's usually a story that needs to be told that you sometimes have neglected. So I want to know that story because I want you to know that that story drives who you are. My story of being an immigrant of being a little bit different, always having an accent, always thinking that I don't quite belong here because I'm not from here, but I'm going to make it so that you can't get rid of me. Right? That drives my story, right? And so I show up, I can't divide myself from that, right? So I show up with that. I show up as an immigrant every single day. I show up as a Black woman every single day, right? And that's part of my story, but that's an integral part of my story. So I usually try to talk about that with an entrepreneur, not the whole details of it, but just saying what drives your story and what drives the impact that you're trying to make. And so you interact with the world accordingly. And I want to make sure that you know that I see that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Recha. It is abundantly clear to me that you don't just care about students and their exploration of entrepreneurship and innovation and business, but you care about the humans, the actual people and what you do. And so it's a gift to have you as a leader in the ecosystem in Atlanta. And I am grateful that you said yes to showing up on this podcast with us. So thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. I mean, you are such a gift.
Oh, thank you.
A wealth of knowledge to these, to just the entrepreneurial landscape, and particularly here in Atlanta. So I just want to say thank you for giving a little bit of your time and just sharing just a smidget of what it is that you know and how you try to help aspiring entrepreneurs. That you're truly an inspiration. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for thinking of me. It's not often that I get to be on a soapbox for a little bit and talk. And so your questions have been super insightful, and it also gave me a chance to think as well, right? Because you kind of go through the day and not necessarily think about and break down what you're doing and how you're doing it, and even if you're doing it well. So thank you. You also gave me a lot of food for thought that I'm going to be thinking through as well. So thank you.
So one of the things that I know that entrepreneurs and just like people in general are struggle with sometimes, for others, they kind of perfect it, is managing time. So Steve, I just want to take a moment to talk with you about how do we effectively manage our time? What are some things that you do to keep you on track and make sure you're using your time as you desire to use your time?
I mean, it's a great question. I think my initial quip would be, I don't know if any of us ever manage time effectively all the time, but I do think using a calendar in terms of how you manage your time, not just the meetings that you have, but how you actually block time on your calendar for particular kinds of work. Whether it's reading, whether it's conversations, whether it's kind of deep work that you have to do, but really kind of blocking out your calendar at the end of each day, looking at what you have in the upcoming week or in the next day, and really kind of planning that way in terms of wrapping up your time. And then also when you get in first thing in the morning or prior to the morning, to kind of look at what you have in the course of the day and how you want to spend that time. And then finally, what I would just say is that I think in terms of actually managing your time is recognizing that everything typically takes longer what you anticipated that it will take. So I try to not cram my day in such a way where I got one meeting after the next meeting after the next meeting, so on and so on. Sometimes you can't help that, but oftentimes I try to build in a little bit of a buffer that allows me to take a little bit more time to gather myself or get from one meeting to the next meeting or to do one thing to the next thing. And so those are just some of the tips that I would offer. What do you do to manage your time? Because you're a pretty good time manager.
Well, thank you. But it is an ongoing process. I do much of what you shared. I live by my calendar. I have time blocked off for meetings and time blocked off for specific work. I recently posted to my LinkedIn or not too long ago that I take time to put my phone on do not disturb during the day so I can actually focus on what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. And ever since I started doing that, that has been a gift. gift. It has been a gift to my life and my productivity and my focus, because it helps me to realize how much I pick up my phone during the day. As soon as it vibrates, I pick it up to see what it is, who's contacting me, or where that notification is coming from. And so that has really freaked me up to focus on my priorities at the time, whether that be work or whether that just be time with family too and friends, still putting my phone on do not disturb during those times. I will also say that one thing that can get me going into a rabbit hole that I should not be getting into is checking my email the first thing in the morning. Because there are additional things that are added to my list of things to do that aren't priorities by going through my email first thing in the morning, and it just kind of throws things off. So I create a list of priorities the night before each day, and I start off with addressing one or two of those key priorities before I even get into my email. So I don't even open it up. And that has helped me to manage my time well. And then I have block time during the day where I do go and I check my emails. So those are just a few things that I do. And I'm sure that you all have things that you're trying out. We are in this together, because I don't know about you, Stephen. I'm always trying to figure out what's going to work. And as life changes, things happen personally or professionally. Sometimes things just have to shift. And so I'm always kind of testing out, experimenting to see what might be best in those different seasons.
Yeah, I agree with you. So thank you for the tips. And if there are more tips that you have in the audience, we'd love to hear from you and hear what you're doing as well.
Absolutely. We hope to see you next time, or have you join us next time on our Do Good X podcast. And until then, be well and do good.
Indeed.
Thank you for listening to the Do Good X podcast. To continue the conversation or access our resources, visit www.dogoodx.org. Join us again for conversations that will nourish your soul, ignite your dreams, and empower you to build an impactful business, one intentional step at a time. Until then, keep striving, thriving, and doing good.